Namaste students. In previous video we have learnt about the great Mughal Empire. Today we are going to see the continuation of lesson the Mughal Empire. Before going to the concept, let's recall the previous one. It was a big challenge for any ruler in the Middle Ages to rule a territory as large and diverse as the Indian subcontinent. The Mughals were the pioneers in building an empire for a long period of time, contradicting their predecessors who ruled only for short periods of time. They expanded their kingdom from the later half of the 16th century from Agra and Delhi to almost all parts of the subcontinent in the 17th century. Their structures of administration and ideas of governance had a place even after their reign was over. In other words, they left a political legacy that even the succeeding leaders of the subcontinent could not ignore. Two great lineages of rulers were the ancestors of the Mughals. From their maternal side, they were the descendants of Genghis Khan, who died in 1227, who ruled the Mongol tribes, China and Central Asia. From their paternal side, they were the descendants of Timur, who ruled Iraq, Iran and modern-day Turkey. Timur died in the year 1404. They did not like to be called Mughal or Mongol. The reason for this is that Genghis Khan's memory was associated with the massacre of innumerable people. It was also associated with Uzbeks, their Mongol competitors. However, they were proud to be in the lineage of Timur to some extent because of his capture of Delhi in 1398. They celebrated their genealogy pictorially, with each ruler getting a picture made of Timur and himself. The military campaign of the Mughals. Babur was the first Mughal emperor in 1526 to 1530. He succeeded the throne of Fergana in 1494 at the age of 12. But another Mongol group, that was the Uzbeks, attacked and forced him to leave the ancestral throne. He wandered for many years and then seized Kabul in 1504. Mughals' relations with other rulers. The Mughals campaigned constantly against rulers who did not accept their authority. With a rise in their power, many rulers voluntarily joined them. Example, the Rajputs. Many Rajputs married their daughters into Mughal families. This enabled them to secure high positions. However, many Rajputs resisted the Mughals as well. Opponents of Mughals. For a long time, the Sisodia Rajputs refused to accept the authority of the Mughals. They were defeated by the Mughals but were not humiliated by them. They were given their lands back as assignments. Mughals followed the principle of defeating but not humiliating. This was the main reason for helping them to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. But Shivaji was humiliated by Aurangzeb, which was contrary to the norms of the Mughals. Mansabdars and Jagirs. With the expansion of the empire, the Mughals recruited diverse bodies of the people. What began as a small nucleus of Turkish nobles expanded to include Iranians, Indian, Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas and other groups. The Mughals enrolled these people as Mansabdars. This term refers to an individual who holds a mansab, which means a position or rank. It was a grading system for fixing rank, salary, and military responsibilities. A numerical value known as Zat was used to determine the rank and salary of a Mansabdar. A higher zat meant a higher rank in the court. It also meant a higher salary. Let's see the duties of Mansabdar. Their military responsibilities included maintaining a specified number of Savar or cavalrymen. Their duties towards cavalrymen were as follows. First one, bringing them for review, getting them registered, getting their horses branded, and paying their salary from the money received. Jagirdars, they received their salary as revenue assignments called Jagirs, which were somewhat like iktas. Most of them did not reside in or administer their Jagirs, unlike Muktis. They only had rights to the revenue of their assignments. The revenue was collected by their servants. The Mansabdars themselves served in other part of the country. During the reign of Akbar, the Jagirs were carefully assessed. This was done to ensure that their revenues were roughly equal to the salary of Mansabdar. But during Aurangzeb's reign, the actual revenue was less than the granted sum. The number of Mansabdars increased exponentially. This meant they had to wait for long before they received a Jagir. There was shortage of number of Jagirs. As a result, many Jagirdars tried to extract maximum possible revenue from their Jagirs. Aurangzeb was unable to control these developments, and hence the peasants suffered a lot during the last years of his reign. Zabt and Zamindars. Tax on the produce of peasantry was the main income of the Mughal rulers. Taxes were paid through the rural elites in most places. Rural elites included the headman or the local chieftain. The Mughals used one term, zamindars, for referring to all intermediaries, whether they were local headmen of villages or powerful chieftains. Let's see the principles of Akbar's rule, especially financial aspects. Todarmal was Akbar's revenue minister. He carried out a careful survey of crop yields, prices, and areas cultivated for 10-year period, that is from 1570 to 1580. Based on this data, tax was fixed on each crop in cash. Each province was divided into revenue circles. Each circle had its own schedule of revenue rates for individual crops. This revenue system was called Zabt. It was prevalent in the areas where Mughal administrators could survey the land and keep very careful accounts, but it was not possible in provinces such as Gujarat and Bengal. The zamindars exercised great deal of power in some areas. Their exploitation by Mughal administrators forced them to rebel against it. These revolts, collectively by zamindars and peasants, challenged the stability of the empire from the end of the 17th century. Let's a closer look at Akbar's policies. Abul Fazl wrote a book titled Akbarnama. Its last volume is called the Ain-i-Akbari. It contains elaborate discussion of the broad features of administration laid down by Akbar. According to Abul Fazl, the empire was divided into provinces called Subas, which were governed by the Subedar, who carried out both political and military functions, which also had a financial offices or divan. The Subedar was supported by other officers for the maintenance of peace and order. Akbarnama and Ain-i-Akbari. Abul Fazl was Akbar's close friend and courtier. He was given the responsibility of writing the history of his reign. He wrote a 3-volume history of his reign titled Akbarnama. Volume 1, it dealt with Akbar's ancestors. Volume 2, it recorded the events of Akbar's reign. Volume 3, it is the Ain-i-Akbari. It deals with Akbar's administration, household, army, the revenues, and the geography of his empire. It also provides rich details about the traditions and culture of the people living in India. The most interesting aspect about it is rich statistical details about things as diverse as crops, yields, prices, wages, and revenues. Akbar's nobles, they commanded large armies and had access to large amounts of revenue. Till they were loyal, the empire functioned very efficiently. But by the end of the 17th century, many nobles had built independent networks of their own. Their self interest was responsible for weakening their loyalties to the empire. Akbar's approach to religion. Akbar started discussion on religion with the ulama, Brahmanas, Roman Catholics, and Zoroastrians when he was at Patapur Sikri during the 1570s. These religious discussions took place in the Ibadat Khana. He was interested in the religion and social customs of various people. Through this interaction, he could realize that religious scholars who emphasized ritual and dogma were often bigots. Divisions and disharmony amongst people was created by their teaching. Eventually, this led Akbar to the idea of Sulh-i-Kul or universal peace. This idea of tolerance was universal in nature, that is, it did not discriminate between people of different religions. It instead focused on a system of ethics comprising of honesty, justice, and peace, which were universally acceptable. Akbar framed a vision of governance around the idea of Sulh-i-Kul with the help of Abul Fazl, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan followed this principle of governance. Let's see the administration under the Mughals. A great deal of income of the Mughal emperors and mansabdars was spent on salaries and goods. This benefited the peasants and artisans who supplied them with produce and goods. The scale of revenue collection was so high that it left very little in the hands of the primary product producers for investment. The poorest among them were struggling for subsistence and could hardly consider investing in additional resources in the form of tools and supplies. The gainers in this economic world were wealthier peasantry and artisanal groups, the merchants and bankers. In the late 17th century, the Mughal elite who had enormous wealth and resources became an extremely powerful group of people. The servants of the Mughal emperors emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions with the decline of the power of the Mughal emperors. They constituted new dynasties and held command of provinces like Awadh and Hyderabad. Although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperors in Delhi as their master, the provinces of the empire had consolidated their independent political identities by the 18th century. Once again, recall the points. Aurangzeb spent more than 20 years of his life fighting major and minor rebellions throughout his Mughal empire. Jahangir was the first who started a trade relationship with the East India Company. Aurangzeb killed his brothers and imprisoned his father to take the throne. The most famous monument of Mughal architecture is the Taj Mahal. It was built in 17th century by Shah Jahan as a tomb for his wife Mumtaz. Babur's tomb was first erected where he was buried in a garden facing the spot where the Taj Mahal was later built, but it was later moved to a garden on a hillside in Kabul. Akbar was 13 years old when he became emperor. Babur was born on February 14th. Let's conclude this lesson with value, preserve our monuments. Okay students, I hope you all understand this lesson thoroughly. Thank you.